But now we're not.
We're good. We're good.
My name's Marcus Miller. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm the director here at the Gordon Snellgrove Gallery. We're thankful to be on Treaty 6 territory, homeland for the Métis and our Aboriginal brothers and sisters. I'm happy to introduce Marie Webster today. This is the fourth talk in the MFA series. There are two more. Next week we'll be entertained here by the queer mummer who's going to spill tea with us next week, so don't miss that. Marie, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction, and I found information on her from a show that she was in a number of years ago here in Saskatoon at an organization, a boutique store actually, called Positive Passions, which is billed as an adult entertainment boutique, but they promote positive sexuality, healthy lifestyles, etc. And she was in a group show then, where she, part of her statement was, I believe the title of the piece was Box? Box, right. So part of the statement is a series of definitions. 1, an area of a public place marked off and restricted, blah, blah. 2, a small structure serving as a shelter. 3, an awkward or perplexing situation, a predicament. 4, a separated compartment in a public place of entertainment. And 5, the female genitalia, especially the vagina. So I'll leave it up to you to guess which definition Marie concentrated on. Marie did her undergraduate degree at ACAT in Calgary and worked in a whole variety of mediums. I know when she first came here, she was showing some beautiful and very nicely crafted drawings, paintings, and you work with ceramics there as well. I know since she's been here, she's done a lot of installation work, more sculpture, and she's working with plants as well now, so that's very interesting. And I hope that she's going to talk a little bit about that. I know that as part of her practice and her life practice, she's very interested in spirituality, witchcraft, the body, and feminism. So I'll give you Marie Webster.
I'm going to stand here for a little bit and I'll get Shiming to change the slides for me because the thing wasn't loading for me. So I'm going to start off with this quote. She has prepared the sleeping earth to bring forth her bounty in the time of summer, which even here has its first beginnings in darkness. So today, it's funny that my talk happens to be on February 1st because today is Imbolc, and because I practice Wicca, it's an important date for me and for a lot of witches. It's the beginning of spring and the coming forth of the new year. It's a symbolism of new growth and inspiration, which is really, really important for me to be connected to this. So I'm going to start off with the beginning. So I started off doing anatomical studies mostly at ACAD. I worked with a man named David Aldridge. He was an anatomy artist who worked in medical textbooks and things like that. So I started studying the female internal structure mostly, which was what my interest was. So this is my baby series. It's on 3 thick cut kind of canvases. And it features the womb, obviously, the uterus, and the fallopian tubes and the ovaries. And then I did a series of ultrasound images of babies as well. So these are pictures of babies from friends of mine, and they're painted in acrylic and mixed collage. And so here, I'll move that away. So this is kind of the start of a lot of my practice was going kind of understanding the body or trying to understand the body for myself. My interest in the female form started to come from my investigation of the internal womb and then going outside to the outside form. When I did start doing photography, I took a photography class, and the idea of the female form. So when you see the female, it's usually the outside of the body. It's usually very overly sexualized. But I did notice that there's not a lot of the internal structure or the idea of the vagina. It's usually something that's really clean cut. It's something that if you see in pornography, it's a smooth surface. And I wanted to kind of investigate the fact that every woman doesn't all look like this. Not every woman has this type of aesthetic, and that was really interesting to me. And so I started investigating different types of vulvas, basically, from different women, different types of bodies, and what they all look like, and the differences that can come in them. And like Marcus had said in the beginning, I did work at Positive Fashion, so I worked in sexual health. And one thing I found really, really interesting was the fact the amount of women that came to talk to me who are married or have been married for many years, women who have been in relationships and having sex for a great deal of time that didn't know about their own bodies. They didn't realize, they would ask me, is this normal? Is this okay? Is it supposed to look like this? Does this feel like this? All kinds of things. And I was really, really fascinated with the fact that there was women who were being extremely sexual and having children, and some of them had multiple children, and they didn't, and I said, well, take a look at yourself, investigate it, and they weren't even comfortable with the idea of looking at themselves, which I thought was really, really interesting for me. The fact that this is a part of our bodies that we're taught to shy away from or shut away from. Even myself in my upbringing, coming from a Catholic home, that was something that was very different for me because I wasn't really taught a lot about sexuality. I was removed from my classrooms being taught sexuality because it was something that was kind of taboo. And I think that part of this process was the fact that it was because I wasn't allowed access to it, I was more interested in it because of it. Can we go on to the next one? And so part of my studies is I got approached by somebody to do a publication for a magazine about the idea of circumcisions, female circumcisions more specifically. And this is a practice that happens in the world all over the place and still to this day, where it's this idea of fear that comes from the female sexuality, basically. Oftentimes it's done for ridiculous reasons because they want the clitoris removed because they don't want the woman to experience pleasure, or there's kind of people being, there's supernatural assumptions about it. So if the baby's head touches the clitoris during childbirth, that it's going to be turned, and the baby will then become gay or lesbian or things like that, right? So it was really, really interesting to me that this is something that happens even here. And it's something that happens that's not done properly. It's usually done with broken pieces of glass. It's done from girls as young as 4 years old, where they remove all different types. So the first part is kind of the general idea of you've got the labia and the clitoris. The first type of circumcision is done as the removal of the clitoris. The second type is removal of the clitoris and the labial lips, and that's called excision. The third is infibulation, where the woman is completely stripped of her entire outer labia, and she has her clitoris removed, and she's also stitched up really, really small to the point where you just allow urine to pass through. And then she's reopened when she's married and she's engages in sexual activity. Oftentimes when this happens, she ends up bleeding out and bleeds to death, which is really, really sad. And so I wanted to make a piece on this to kind of comment on things like this that happen. Go next slide, please. So this one, as I was doing these pieces at the school, I was met with a lot of, what would you say, confrontation. People weren't really happy about the fact that I was doing these things, that it was gross, that it was disgusting. Why do you want to paint vulvas and vaginas? And it bothered me that it was such a problem for a lot of people. So what I ended up doing is, instead of doing these small little pieces because they were intimate and small, I decided to do a really big one. And this was a big one. This one was actually 10 feet, 8 feet by 10 feet. And it was interesting because the people that were supposed to be there to critique the work, they weren't comfortable critiquing it, and they actually left the room. And that started to really, really, and they were men, of course, which really infuriated me. Because I've been in galleries, I've gone to lots of different art galleries, you see the phallus all the time. And I've never walked out because it was something that bothered me or made me uncomfortable. And so this kind of started this drive for me for this entire, you'll see the rest of my slides, it really, really pushed my whole practice forward. Can you go ahead, please? So this is a piece, it's called The Great Wall of Vagina. This is a man named Jamie McCartney. He's an artist in Great Britain, and I actually called him up because I was absolutely fascinated by this. The fact that there was all different types of women, and this is something that was really interesting because of the fact that they were all different, and they're actual casts of women, they're not just paintings, it's a visual representation of the different forms that you can get from woman to woman. And I wanted to know how he did this, right? Because I was like, if you can't put plaster on your body, it's going to heat up. That's not going to be good. And so I called him and I asked him what he used to make these molds, and he said alginate, which is basically dental mold that you use for your teeth. You can't get it from the dentist's office because it has peppermint in it, which would burn if you put it on you. But I got the stuff that didn't have all the dental mint in it, and I ended up getting a whole bunch of it and ordered it from the States, and I started to do casts. You can go to the next one. And so these are casts that I did of myself. What I did is I wanted to investigate what it looked like, and show people the differences in people's bodies. So this is actually a piece that I did. I actually had to just stand up on my head. I mixed the alginate, wanted to do a mold of my body. And I had to sit there for 3 minutes while it hardened. Because I was interested in not just the external, but also the internal, what the foam looked like inside. I wanted to, because for men, it's out there. You can see it's very visible. For women, it's very much internal. So there's a lot of it that's still mysterious for us. So I molded the inside, which actually got stuck, and I ended up having to go to the hospital. I finished the mold, and I pulled it out, and then I pulled it out, it had broken off at the tip, and I was like, oh my God. And so I was in there, I was trying to push, nothing was coming out, so I had to go to the hospital at like 3 o'clock in the morning in Calgary. And I went to the person there, and he's like, what's your emergency? I was like, I have molding paste inside my body, and it's not coming out. And she's like, I'm not even gonna ask, like I'm an art student, just whatever. She's like, it's okay, just put lots of like lube in there, just push and it'll come out eventually. So that's the broken piece that I finally eventually got out, like literally 2 days later. It came out while I was walking to school, actually. It was awful. But yeah, this is kind of what it looks like. So it's this kind of internal canal where it pitches off, it gets kind of tight, then it opens up into this cavity, which has this ribbing in it, which I thought was fascinating. Just the form and the shape of it was really interesting to me. You can keep going in between. So I did multiple casts of different women. This one's done in cement. And this one's one of a person who has an engorged clitoris, and that's also something that's interesting, kind of the idea of like hermaphrodites, or people who are intersex, and when their genitalia doesn't look like the traditional female form, that they're still like, where do you stand as far as the binary goes? Are you masculine? Are you more feminine? And is that okay? Is that not okay? And that is something that's completely normal because it's different and it's unique. And I wanted to kind of display the fact that there's all different types of forms that you can find in the body. You can go to the next one. This one's done in gold. And so this brings me to my show at the National Gallery in Calgary. We did a show for, it was for one of our graduating years, and we were all supposed to pick a spot. I had last pick, be my last name W, so I always did the last pick of everything. So I had this space that was like, basically right here, and I'm a painter, so I'm like, what am I supposed to do with a concave wall? I can't even hang a painting there. It's gonna look ridiculous to put on the pillar. What am I gonna do with this space? So I started thinking, and I was stressed, and so I decided to not do anything and watch movies. Go to the next one. And I stumbled upon this video. It was called The Shrinking Lover. It is by Almodovar, which is a Spanish filmmaker. And the story is about this woman who is intensely in love with this man. They're a couple that's in love. And he is extremely obese. And he's sad because he can't love her properly the way she wants him. He wants her to. He wants to. And she happens to be a scientist, so she makes this concoction, and she sits and she builds it and makes it, and she's trying to get this concoction to make him smaller, basically, so he can be fit and he can love her the way she wants to be loved and all these things. And he was so excited when she thinks she finished it. He grabs it, he drank it, and it worked, and he shrank, and he went smaller and smaller. He looked good, he was fit, he was looking handsome, but he kept shrinking vertically as well, and he got smaller and smaller and smaller. He's like, well, I really can't love you because I'm like the size of your pinky. And it was like this sad story, and so he took off in the middle of the night and ran away. And she spent the rest of her life looking for him. And she eventually found him in an alleyway and picked him up and was like, you're never leaving me, like I'm gonna love you forever, it doesn't matter if you're big or small, I still wanna be with you. And they had this ridiculous love scene that I found was so adorable and really, 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 really beautiful. So what happened is they go to sleep at night, and he's afraid to go to sleep with her because she's afraid she's gonna roll over and squish him in the bed. And she's like, don't worry about it. He's like, I'll be fine, just go to sleep, relax. And so she goes to sleep and she's naked. And as she's sleeping, he's rolling around on her body like it's a landscape. But I thought this was really, really cute. So he goes down between her breasts and he rolls between her breasts. to her belly, and he goes and sees between her legs, and was like, oh my gosh, you see this mound, it's beautiful, I want to investigate this. So he goes down and he crawls inside her vagina. He lives inside her vagina basically the rest of his life. And I thought it was really, I thought it was really, really cute, just the way the scene is, because you see between her legs, and you see that he opens it up, he puts his hand in, it's a little bit interesting, puts his head in, and then he just dives in completely. And I'm like, how cool would that be to be able to go inside a female body, like to be inside the vagina. So my next piece, with the help of my mom, I decided to make a walk-in vagina, basically, what it would be like to see, like to go inside a woman's body. So I'm not really good with sewing, so my mom helped me a lot on this. And it was a really great bonding experience for me and my mom as well, because it's something we didn't really talk about as far as like sexuality in our bodies, because again, it was something we didn't really talk about as kids. And she's like, well, I don't know what she's like, I don't understand what you're trying to make here. Like, I don't get it. I'm like, I was like, Mom, here, take a mirror, go look at yourself. I'm going to school, I'll come back, and then we'll talk about how we're gonna make this thing. And she's like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. I've never looked at this. And it was really interesting for me to see someone that I care about, somebody like my mom, to experience something like that and find themselves in this. And so we built this massive vagina. Go to the next one, please. And so it was this, I went and got this like fake fur, I got silk, and we built the lips. And it was funny because I went to the fabric store and I had to get like copious amounts of fake fur. The guy's like, are you making like a coat? I'm like, it's kind of like a coat. I'm like, and he's like, what are you making? Like a big vagina? And the guy's like, oh my God, girl. He's like, I need to see this. Like, it was fantastic. And people really, really liked it. You can go to the next one, please. And so, yeah, what I did is I blocked off the whole entire panel of underneath the stairwell. And so when you go in, I had gotten piping, like plumbing piping, and put through like basically a big sheath through it so it looked like the internal canal of a vagina. You put humidifiers in there to make it nice and moist and warm in there. And people could actually go inside and just sit and be in this space, which I thought was kind of interesting. It brought to me mind the idea of safe spaces, some comfort. It's also community where people got together. And people, it was about 8, I think there was about 9 or 12 people up there at some point, which was really, really funny. And people just hung out there. They brought their beer, and at first I wasn't sure how to react. I was like, are people going to be kind of more respectful? But people really, really enjoyed it. And it was really, really good experience for me. Go to the next one. Okay. So as I was doing this, I took a class in fiber dye and silk dye. And this is really, really interesting, the idea of how we get pigments, because I am a painter traditionally. So I started researching how we form and get natural pigmentation. So I started working with my own body. The idea of menstrual blood, menstruation, the color of it red, the color of blood was really interesting to me. This was kind of like the Shroud of Turin to me. It reminds me of the different stages of bleeding. So you would sit on it and bleed out, and then you'd wait another next day, and then it would form these stain marks, which I thought was really, really interesting. Also the idea of like negligee and things that women wear, and you know, lots of girls experience this. You buy something really, really pretty, you go to bed, you wake up, and it's like, oh, it's ruined, right? But it's actually quite beautiful in the way that it happens sometimes. And so I wanted to display it. This is something that you shouldn't be ashamed of. This is something that you shouldn't be frustrated about, because it's something that's natural and it's beautiful. Yeah. So I started to investigate this research of bleeding, how I was really interested in the idea of how women's fertility, for example, tends to, you can match it up with the moon cycles. And this is something that kind of started to really, really go through my head a lot. The idea that women have this natural connection with earth cycles and with moon cycles, and how it follows the 28-day cycle or the 30-day cycle. And I was fascinated by the fact that my fertility would grow with the growing moon. And so I wanted to make a commentary. And so I did studies where I would match up the moon phases with my own LH surges and my fertility, and it kind of started this process for me. Let me change it now, please. And then in the middle of this investigation, I stopped bleeding completely. And it was hard for me because this was a new material I was working with. It was something I was really excited about, and then I could no longer work with it because it just didn't come anymore. And at first I was kind of like, oh, whatever, no period, that's great. Yeah, I'm excited, I don't have to deal with this anymore. But after like about 6 months, it started to become a problem because there was something wrong. So I went to the doctors and I found out that this is a polycystic ovary, which means you have cysts on your ovaries that form into tumors. which prevents you from menstruating and causes things like weight gain and all different types of like hair growth. And what happens is it basically changes your androgen so that you don't have the build of estrogen like most women do. You have more of an incline of testosterone. So my body started to change a lot, and I didn't experience things like most women did. And that was a really, really hard thing for me to go through, especially considering that a lot of what I dealt with had to do with fertility and babies and motherhood and menstruation. And I was just like, well, what am I going to do now? And I started to question my own womanhood. Does that make me, what if I can't have children, right? And this is something that I had always wanted so bad, and it was all of a sudden not a possibility for me anymore, which was really, really hard for me to deal with. Go next. So this was this was a piece that I did in commentary of this, and it was, so the back of it, these are cells. So I did these paper presses with cells, open cells, and it was leftover bits of blood mixed with dye that I had collected from different plants. And the dye, basically you can gather plants, all different types of plants. You can get it from anything, like red onion skins, snapdragons, all kinds of stuff. And you boil it down, and you boil it for hours and hours, and it basically renders it down to small little bits of pigment. And so I use these natural dyes, including my own body, to kind of make this this idea of cells, or the idea of like how my ovaries would look, like the polycystic, so there's multiples of. And I use this this mannequin, a representation of myself. I was at the Alberta Boot Factory, and they were throwing out these mannequins in the back of a truck. I was like, can I have one of those? And he was like, sure. So I took her like in bits and pieces to my house, and I attached a salmon steak to her area, her vulva area, to kind of simulate the. And basically, what happened is this: it was a fresh piece of salmon, which doesn't really smell like much, but as time goes on, as it dries out, it starts to get really, really fishy. It starts to comment on the idea that a lot of, for men, for example, you can see if there's something wrong usually, because it's right there. With a lot of women, it's internal. So if there's something wrong with our bodies, we don't really know unless we're kind of tuned into ourselves. So we'll smell different things, it'll feel different, there'll be different types of excretions. So I kind of wanted to make commentary on the fact that there's things like this with our bodies that we really need to be in tune in, because we don't know what's going on, and really pay attention to ourselves. People did not like it because it stunk up the whole gallery for like weeks. You'd walk by and it would smell like fish. But that's how it happens sometimes. And then of course the rose petals on the bottom to symbolize the idea. And that was kind of the start of me working with natural materials, this nice idea of death and how things, even in darkness, even in death, that sometimes beauty can come from that. You go to the next, please. And so I started thinking about my spirituality, and I went back to things that made me feel whole, and made me feel to get some understanding for myself, understanding about why things were happening. And so I started to investigate Wicca and what that meant for me. You can go to the next, please. And so I made this piece, which was called Genocide. So it was basically, this is a commentary on the fact that thousands and thousands and thousands of women have been burnt at the stake because of false accusations, or accusations of being witches. This stems from a fear of the female, a fear of the female power, that there's power in our connection with nature, there's power in our connections with the earth, and the fact that multiple women have been discriminated against and killed because of the fact that they are just women. That is the only reason. And so I made these panels on silk, and these were all plants that I had rendered. So I had collected literally like bags full of plants to make all of the dye from these. So this is all natural dye. It's from snapdragons, it's from onions, it's from all different types of plants. My brother helped me with this as well. And then I went and got some old wood that was rotted and burnt, and put it down to kind of resemble the idea of burning at the stake. And what was really beautiful about this piece is because it's on silk panels, when you walk past it, the panels would move. So it's kind of like this smoky ethereal that came from me around this, which was really, really quite. And it's quite a tall piece. It's about 12 feet high. So I've used this quote a couple of times, and I really like it. And she's one of my favorite writers. And it says, women's role in creation should be parallel to her role in life. I don't mean the good earth, I mean the bad earth too. The demon, the instincts, the storms of nature, tragedies, conflicts, mysteries, all are personal. Man fabricated attachment with which became fatal. Women must not fabricate. She must descend into the real womb and expose its secrets and its labyrinths. She must decide it as the city of Fez, with its Arabian Nights gentleness, tranquility, and mystery. She must describe the voracious moods of the desires the world contained in each cell of it. For the womb has dreams. It is not simply as the good earth. I believe at times that man created art out of fear of exploring women. I believe woman stuttered about herself out of fear of what she had to say. She covered herself with taboos and veils. The man invented a woman to suit his needs. He disposed of her by identifying her with nature, and then paraded his contemptuous domination of nature. But woman is not nature only. She is the mermaid, her fishtail dipped in the unconscious. So this, when I found this piece, it really, really spoke volumes to me. The idea of people's fear of women's power from nature. And the fact that oftentimes when you think of things that fear, what do mankind fear the most? And that's nature. It's something it's things that we can't control. And the one thing we can't control the most is nature. Natural things like hurricanes and tornadoes. They're things we have no control of. You have no idea when they're coming, and they scare us. And oftentimes when you think of the idea of women, women are often associated with nature because of the unpredictability, because we're emotional, because we're up and down, right? We're all over the place. And so because of this connection, there's a detachment from it. We can kind of men can separate themselves from us and go, oh, she's just being emotional, or oh, she's just being this, because whatever. And I think that that's not something to be afraid of. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something that I think there's a great source of power. And I think as women, we need to pull that and bring that in and embrace that, the part of ourselves. Can we go to the next, please? And so I came here. I stopped creating for a long time after I graduated. They always tell you that when you go to art school, that don't stop creating because that's a problem. You can sometimes go off and life can go by and it'll be a long time before you start working again. That's exactly kind of what happened. I was depressed. I was sad. My inspiration was kind of gone at this point. But I knew I wanted to keep doing because art has been something that's always been the most important thing in my life. It's the only thing that I really, really felt that it spoke to my spirit and it spoke to my soul, and it was something that I felt that I had to do. So I came back to school here to get my degree. When I came here, I kind of got in this ridiculous creative block where I couldn't create. I didn't know what was going on. I had all these ideas I wanted to do, but as soon as I got here and I had the freedom and the ability to do it, it's like I froze. And so I went back to what I normally did back in the day, which was painting. I said, just go back to what you're comfortable with. So I started painting, and I paint in watercolor, so I paint the female form. And so I did just series of watercolors and just nudes after nude after nude. And I did quite a few series of these, of just the watercolor series. Just trying to get into the idea of the fluidity and using the brush and using the pigmentation and just kind of getting comfortable in my surroundings again and getting kind of comfortable with just creating again, basically. And then I did this piece. And this was a piece that was really, really hard for me to create. When I first came here, I took a class, and we're supposed to do something outside of our traditional medium, which for me was anything that has to do with anything with computers or anything that I can't. Computers break. I don't like my TV's the oldest TV I think in Saskatoon. So I wanted to learn about technology and the idea of different forms of art making. And so performance work was something that was always interesting to me. I love people like Marina Abramovic for their strength and their courageousness, able to stand in front of a group of people and shed yourself and expose yourself, be vulnerable, and it can be quite profound. And so I wanted to do a piece about the idea of creative blocks and how oftentimes when we're trying to create, what happens when we're trying to create is we start to hear kind of this constant backlash of things that we've heard in our lives from different people. You're not good enough, or you can't do this, or you're just a silly girl, or no one's going to care about it, or things. And even as a woman, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a good woman, that you should be a good mother, you should have skills like cooking, you should be nurturing, you should be all these things that I'm supposed to be and things I'm not supposed to be. And it can be really, really suffocating and extremely difficult to go through because it blocks my ability for freedom and for expression, because I'm constantly worried about how this is going to affect somebody, or maybe I'm not good enough. You start to doubt yourself if you listen to the things that you've heard a lot. And especially as a woman, I've heard all kinds of things from men. Things in relationships, no one's going to love you the way I love you, and no one's going to, all of these things that tend to bring us down. We hear them especially from the men in our life, our fathers specifically, and our partners. And so I set up a room where I had speakers in every corner of the room, and I did a recording of the things that I've heard from the people in my life, the men in my life, that have stopped me from being the strong person that I want to be. Things that I'm not able to do, or I haven't been told that I haven't been good enough to do, or that I'm not going to be able to do. And it was a really interesting thing for me because I proposed this idea to the instructor at the time, and the instructor told me that I shouldn't do it. That this isn't a good place for it, this is a university, there's going to be boys in the classroom, that they're going to be uncomfortable with the nudity, it's not going to make them, and I was astounded at the fact that I was told again in a situation that I can't do something after this. The whole piece was about the fact that I was told I can't do things. And I did it anyways. So we had the crit, and they weren't really sure what they were walking into, but they knew it was going to be a performance piece. And I wanted to talk about the idea of shedding these comments in my head and trying to remove all of this stuff that's been in my head for so long, that's blocked me from being a creative person and being open. And so what I did is I covered myself in clay. When you walked into the room was dark, and there was a light above my head. And you could hear my voice repeat all of the things that I've heard in my life that really, really got me down, that stopped me from being who I want to be. And as these things were playing, I would scrape the clay from my body. And this lasted for about 10 minutes. And after I finished, the people in the class, the response from it was really, really interesting, because the guys in my class that were supposed to be uncomfortable with it were the ones who were the most affected. Some of them were crying. Some of them were like, wow, I can't believe that this is something that he's like, I would never realize that the things that I said, how much of an impact it had on the people that I said it to. And if I could touch one person in that room to help them understand that we have to be aware of the things that we speak, because they become part of people's personal mantras, right? And it was a really, really interesting experience for me, because I felt like I connected with people, and what was beautiful about it too is the fact that everybody in that room was part of a process for me, which was really intimate and something that's never going to happen again. And that's something I really, really love about performance work, is that something that can't really be created. It's like something that is just in the moment. It's something that you're a part of, and that's gone, right? And something about that really, really interested me. And so as a painter, I was trying to think of like, how can I keep this process lasting longer? Because it is something that's kind of ethereal. I said, well, what I found really interesting was the marking that happened on the floor. So as I was listening to this and as I was going through this process, it kind of became meditative. What I realized is I started to make this kind of rhythmic moving with my body, which turned into these markings on the floor. And so I went back into the studio afterwards. I laid large pieces of canvas, and I basically recreated what happened in that room, which is something that it's basically impossible to do, but I tried. And so I did these big body pieces where I pressed my body from clay, and I also did the movement that I did on the floor. So when I was sitting about here, and that would be the movement that I would make with my hand. So I made these big scale, basically body paintings with the clay. And then clay was something that's really, I love getting my hands in things, I love getting dirty, I love the mud, I love being in earth, squishing it between my toes. I love that feeling of being connected with the earth. And so for part of our class, we went up to the Delta up north, and it was an interesting experience for me too, just being closer and close to nature, and it kind of really brought me back to where I wanted to kind of go with my work. It inspired me as far as imagery and things that I found fascinating, and things I really wanted to work with natural materials. It brought this new inspiration for me of working with the natural earth, and how specific things in the earth reflected parts that I've been working with and themes I've been working with for a really long time. So things like this. And so I find that it's people are like, oh, you're obsessed with vaginas. It's not just obsessed with vaginas. It's the fact that this imagery, I see it everywhere. I see it in trees, I see it in fruit, I see it everywhere. Maybe it's because I like it, or people always say that you're fascinated with things you love the most, at which you understand the most. And there's something that's really, really intriguing from this idea of the cave, or a place that you can kind of go into that's really, really, for me, it's very inviting. So I started, you can go again. I started working with natural materials, and this is called the coco de mar. And the coco de mar, this is made out of copper, and it's a necklace I made. Coco de mar is a fruit that is, you found at the bottom of the sea. It's from a tree, and it's basically like this. And the outside of the fruit, it looks like a woman's bum, basically. And if you cut the flesh on the inside, it has the resemblance of the female genitalia. And these are massive things. They take thousands and thousands of years to grow. And this was inspired to me because my grandmother actually used to read stories to me about like mermaids. I always loved mermaids. And these were told that these were the fruit of the mermaids, right? And I found this was really, really beautiful, this idea of these sirens, right? And sirens are also something that's really scary. If you read actual old stories of sirens are not these beautiful women that you just swim with and go, like they would pull them down. They were seen as women that would like pull them into their death, right? Something again that's seen as something to be afraid of or fearful of. And so I started working with different types of rocks, agate crystals, how these forms, these natural forms take on this shape. And so adding things like clay and black clay and female and all different things to try to add to these things to kind of show what I see. When I see these things, this is what I see. Basically everywhere I go. I go into a crystal shop, this is what I see. And so I started making all these different forms. You know the next one. This one's with the Druzy quartz. And so I would sculpt onto these. This is a shell. I did a clam shell. And these are quite small, and they're really, really intimate. And what I love about these is the smoothness of them and how they have, again, this kind of cavernous type of look, right? And this idea of getting close and getting intimate with something and how it can kind of, it looks sexual, but it also looks very, very inviting to me. This one is this reminds me of the vaginal dentata, you know, like with the teeth. People are always afraid of like the vagina, like, you know, you put it in, it's like clamp down on you, you're not gonna let go, and there's like this big fear. I found that really, really interesting with this one. They kind of take on these little kind of personalities, like little amoebic forms, right? This is the big, so I started working with conch shells. Conch shells are also really, really interesting. This idea of like from the sea. And also, again, women's association with the sea or with the ocean. And how, again, back to the moon cycles and how that's tied into the gravitational pull of the moon and how there's a connection with water, especially for me. Me being a fire sign, for some reason I find extreme comfort in being in water. There's something really, really fluid about it. The idea of water is comforting to me. So I think shells have a lot of relation to that for me in these pieces. And it's really hard to actually work with the clay because to get to match, it's really to try and match something to make it look like it's naturally found. So these objects I wanted to make, not like it was something I'm adding to it, but as if this would be something you would walk along the beach and be like, oh my gosh, this is what I found. I found like legit a vagina shell, like a vulva shell. And this is where the shell would stop, but to create it so it has that natural marbling plus the shaping, it takes a lot of time and a lot of, my eyes feel like I'm gonna go crazy sometimes, but it takes a lot of detail to get that natural form in them. And the pearls. So this also brings to me that, like, as I'm doing this, I've been doing a lot of reading, trying to understand, especially female sexuality and the female body. And it's funny because people always go like, oh, Marie, why are you so obsessed with this subject? It's because this is something that's still important. This is people like, oh, feminism is not needed. This is something that is extremely needed. And as I've been studying about these things, there's things about the female body that you don't even realize. Like, just recently I was reading that there's been studies done of sexual dysfunctions in the world. There's a recorded 14,000 sexual dysfunctions, all of which are associated with the male body. In the female body, there has only been 3,000 studies. So that is literally more than triple what is out there for women. There has just been found literally within the past decade that the female clitoris, for example, is the only organ on the human form that is made solely and strictly for pleasure, which I found really, really interesting. And so also the fact that we just realized that the female clitoris is not just this small little piece that's on the top. It actually is an organ that runs along the entire female, like the whole entire female vulva and outer labial lips and down into the center. So it's a huge connected organ that, again, these are things that people don't know about. And the fact that we've been sexual beings, that we've been having sex, and that we're people that have been functioning in this world, and there's all these studies about men and hardly any about women's sexuality, which is ridiculous because women's sexuality is very complicated, as we know, even to the people who own this part, right? This is a piece I did on barnacles. And it's got little porcelain pieces. And now which brings me to these pieces. I had a video for you guys, but it's not working, unfortunately. But this is what I've been working on as of late. So I've been trying to get away from just the vaginal imagery, because I'm starting to be coined the vagina artist, so the vagina girl, like, or the vulva artist, which I don't mind, but again, I don't want to become just like this one trope, right? Because it's much more than that. And so for me, this is something that I've kind of come back to again, which was something that was painful for me to touch on, but it's something I think that I need to address, so I have to stop avoiding. And that's the idea of reproduction or a woman's worth, basically. So growing up in a Catholic home, you're taught oftentimes that women, or our purpose on life, is for procreation. That is what our purpose is for here. And so for me, as a woman who can't procreate, what does that mean for where does my value lie, right? Where is the value of my life as a woman lie? If I can't have children, I can't bear children, I can't bear great men as women do, what is my purpose of this worth? So I wanted to make pieces about the fact that there can be beauty in things that aren't working all necessarily as they're supposed to, right? So these are using natural plants. And I went and picked I raided my mom's garden, and I started to make these. They're basically the female reproductive system, right, with the uterus and the womb, and then of course you have the fallopian tubes and the ovaries. And what I did with these pieces is that once that they're created, because they have to be done quite quickly because they're with fresh flowers, because as the flowers are out of water, they start to die slowly, right? And what I found was interesting is that these flowers didn't just break apart and fall, like they still held on pretty good, but they faded, their colors faded, they shriveled, but they're still very much intact and they're still very much there. So I was talking with my doctor, and that is also something that kind of came up, was the fact that they want to remove my reproductive system. Because of the fact that I have cysts on my ovaries, they turn into tumors, which can be problematic and cause problems for me later on down the road. They said, well, Marie, why don't we just like get rid of the whole thing? That way we don't have to worry about it. And that is something that I'm still struggling with, because I still have that hope that there's a possibility there. Just because one person says that doesn't mean that that's necessarily the case. And because it might not be functioning as a normal person's, does not mean that it's not something that's supposed to be there or something that's meant to be there. So these pieces for me are really, really hard to talk about sometimes, because it's something that I'm still dealing with. But I think they're really important because it shows the beauty and the value for me in stuff that is dead or things that don't work as well. But there's beauty in them, because there's something really, really, I don't know how to say this.